Hi guys, I want to respond to some comments I have been getting on my recent videos regarding the Let's Play Fallout 4 with Frank. And those comments have been along the lines of, oh my god, you put synths before humanity. You value toasters more than you do human beings. And I just want to respond to that and say, no, I do not. That is not the choice I made. That is not what I think. And that is not what happened. I, as Frank, chose the people of the Commonwealth over the people of the Institute. I chose to save the people of the Commonwealth from the Institute. It's almost as if people have forgotten that there are people in the Commonwealth. It's not just humans in the Institute versus synths in the Institute, and I've had to choose one group. I'm choosing to defend the many people of the Commonwealth, the settlers. I'm the general of the Minutemen. It's my responsibility to look after these people. People of Diamond City and many other places. People who are under constant threat from the Institute, from their synth raiding parties, from infiltration and so on. Now I know the Institute has been trying to get a little less nefarious under Sean, but I've seen plenty of hints and plenty of evidence that this is still not the case. Now, I did briefly entertain the idea of turning the Institute to a force for good myself, but in my very first meeting, I was given one choice. I had one power to decide whether or not we made more weapons or more soldiers. Not exactly filling me with hope. Then of course the next thing that happens is Sean tells me I have to go off and execute the leader of the railroad, and it just became obvious that things were never going to change. Anytime the Institute saw someone as a threat to their interests, they were going to kill them, abduct them, or something, possibly even worse, torture them, experiment on them. This was going to keep happening. It wasn't going to stop when I took over. It wasn't going to stop when I killed one person in the railroad. I mean, how many people did I have to kill in the railroad before they would stop? And what happens if another group come up and try and resist the Institute's schemes? Do I have to wipe all them out as well? It just became pretty obvious that the Institute had to be stopped for the good of the people of the Commonwealth. And honestly, at that point, I'm not totally sure what other choices I had. The Brotherhood were already out of the picture, and that was never going to be an option anyway. I think you really had to not be paying attention if you thought Frank would ever side with the Brotherhood, because of course the Brotherhood want to wipe out not just synths like Nick, not just super mutants like Strong, but all the ghouls as well, and a lot of my settlers are ghouls, and Frank would never agree to killing off ghouls either. It's just not something that's going to be within his temperament or mine. I mean, if you're wondering where I wouldn't kill off ghouls just because what? Because they don't have skin? No, not at all. No. That was never going to happen. Frank was never that character. If you thought he was and are disappointed, I'm really not sure you were paying attention. And so really, the last people to turn to were the railroad. They were the only people who were going to help me. I do know that there is supposed to be a Minutemen ending. I didn't know that at the time, and more importantly, I still don't exactly know how to trigger it. I've heard some spoilers, but that pretty much wasn't an option at that point. And here's the thing, I'm not totally sure I would have taken it anyway. I'm not totally sure why it would be better to use the Minutemen, who only want to protect settlements, to attack the Institute, rather than use the railroad. I mean, this is a case of the enemy of my enemy is my ally. Although, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think saving the synths was the right thing to do. I think saving the synths was a good thing to do, but I actually think the railroad were better prepared to attack the Institute, far better prepared than the Minutemen. They'd been planning for this. They were trained for this. They were committed for this. Whereas the Minutemen weren't. They're just defending settlements. Why would I drag the Minutemen into this when the Railroad are just dying to get in there? Plus, the Railroad have got a plan that's going to A, free synths, which is a good thing, and B, those synths are going to fight on our side. That gives us an inside edge. All round, the Railroad would have been a better option by far than the Minutemen. That's how it feels to me. The only other option is for me to just start shooting people in the Institute. You know, Sean says, go off and do this, and I think, well, that's it, I've had enough now. And just start laying into everyone with rocket launchers and mini nukes. That's probably the way to get most people killed. I think doing it alone. Going in with the Railroad was probably the way with the least body count, saving the maximum number of people, because remember, we did evacuate a lot of the people, and also saving the synths. And just because I saved the synths in the process does not suddenly mean their lives mean more than humans. And on that side note, actually, I mean, that's one of those subjects that's very difficult to figure out anyway, because when it comes down to it, I don't know the answer to that question, because we're in whole new territories. We're in the territory of self-awareness and artificial intelligence, and whilst I know quite a lot about the subject, I am not an expert, and I know the experts haven't solved this issue. Can an artificial intelligence be self-aware? I mean, they can pass tests we've designed to detect self-awareness. They can fool the test, but then by that argument, humans can fool the test. How do you detect self-awareness? There is no... You got to remember, our brains are, you know, they have a bunch of electrochemical processes. They are... It's very hard to just point at something. That's the bit, that big squidgy bit there. If you poke it, that's your self-awareness. It's not as simple as that. So this question's just is beyond my ability to answer, and I'm the sort of person who would tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to this. I think it's a very dangerous thing when we have, you know, artificial intelligence that could become self-aware and may one day see us as a threat. I think this is something we need to be careful of, although I do know that our nature as human beings is to not be careful with this, and we open Pandora's box, and we inevitably will. But then also to err on the careful side and say, if there's a chance that they're self-aware, maybe we should treat them that way. If they can act it, if they can express what seems to be an actual desire to not be killed and not be enslaved, maybe we should behave that way. And if we don't want that to happen, stop making machines that can imitate, at the very minimum, that type of behavior. Stop creating machines that clever. But that's a whole new subject, and I'm not really even comfortable touching that one. But people were saying, well, you're putting their lives and valuing them greater than humans. Well, no, and in fact, I can show you clearly that the opposite is true. That even though I want to give them respect and I want to treat them as self-aware beings, I do not value their lives as much as humans. And the reason I can show you that is, just imagine if I had got to the Institute, met Sean, and instead of it being synths they were using as manual labour, it was slaves they had abducted from the Commonwealth. Just picture that. All these people they've been abducting and replacing with synths, they've now turned into slaves. Do you think for half a second Frank would have entertained any idea of trying to join them? Or do you not think Frank would have immediately decided right there, right then, to take the Institute out and quite probably put a bullet in his own son? No remorse, well, probably some remorse, but no moral ambiguity about it. If the Institute had been abducting Commonwealth people and turning them into slaves, there'd have been no moral argument, there'd have been no hesitation. They would have been marked for extinction, in my opinion, from Frank. Frank would have said, that's it, they're done. He would have found anyone who was willing to help. He would have gone in and he would have shut the thing down and freed the humans. No ambiguity. The fact that Frank was so torn on the issue, the fact that he was trying to find alternative ways, the fact that he was so forgiving, Even though he thinks Father Sean was wrong and the other Institute people are wrong, he was more forgiving of their using the synths that way than he ever would have been had they been humans. Because if that had been humans, that story would have been a lot shorter and would have involved a lot more mini nukes. But can we just stop acting as if I got to the end and I was given 4 choices on a terminal somewhere like some other games we've had, and I was like, oh right, okay, yeah, no, I'll pick the railroad ending, kill all humans, save synths. Yes, that's the one I'll take. This was a complicated process with lots of things happening all the way along. Had I known now what I know then, would I have done things differently? Almost certainly. If Frank, for example, had known that there was no way he could turn the Institute around, they were never going to be a force for good in the Commonwealth. They were always going to be best case scenario, a slight negative, worst case scenario, an utter horror. I would have almost certainly not helped them get the power source, and I would have gone and informed the Brotherhood, hoping they could help me stop them getting that, which I'm sure they would have. Would I have used the Brotherhood to take out the Institute? Maybe, but I would have been very nervous about letting the Brotherhood get a hold of teleportation technology. The Brotherhood are pretty powerful to start with, although people very often overestimate how strong they are. They overestimate them because they've got the Pridwin, which is a reasonable base, but it wasn't that hard to take out. They overestimate them because they have vertibirds and power armor. Well, power armor's all over the bloody Commonwealth. There's tons of the stuff. And the vertibird advantage didn't seem that big an advantage to me, seeing as they were constantly being shot down by bloody raiders. So, all in all, the Brotherhood were not... I mean, they were a threat to the people of the Commonwealth, but probably one that they could deal with. Give the Brotherhood teleportation technology as well, and, they'd have just been teleporting into the settlements, killing off anyone they didn't agree with, and gone. I'm not sure I could have lived with that. And of course that brings us full circle back to who would I then choose to invade the Institute with, and the answer is still probably the Railroad for all of the reasons I said before. They seem to be the obvious choice. They seem to be better prepared for it. I don't think I'd be willing to risk the Minutemen and therefore the settlements, and saving synths at the same time is a good idea. Would this then make me go to war with the Brotherhood? I don't know. I've not read up the wikis, and all I've seen are some spoilers on the comment section. I don't know what happens at that point. Maybe if I then use the Railroad, the Brotherhood don't find out about it, and everyone's still alive except the Institute. We freed the synths. Who knows? Maybe the Brotherhood still get wind of it and attack the Railroad. Would that, even knowing that, would that make me then pick the Minutemen? Well, no. Again, without knowing for sure what happens in the Minutemen ending, if I invade with the Minutemen, I'm going to do pretty much the same, aren't I? I'm not going to... I mean, if I invade with the Minutemen, I'm going to allow anyone in the Institute who surrenders, anyone who doesn't pick up a weapon, to leave, and that's going to include the synths. And I'm guessing an awful lot of the synths who are like sweepers and not trained to kill and want to leave will probably not fight back. I mean, why would they? They might even think it was the Railroad attacking. They might think it's the Railroad attacking and think they're going to be freed. And I would, of course, evacuate them out and free them. Would this then mean the Brotherhood attack the Minutemen? Would they attack the settlements? They could. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but even if it's not, that's the logical thing to think. In the end, this is not about looking at 4 different endings and picking one. I know some people actually do that. They find out what the endings are, and then they do what's required to get to that ending. But I don't do that. And, that's going to make my playthrough messy. It's going to make it not have the best ending or the best result that I might want. If it were possible to have absolutely everybody survive, including the Institute, that is what I would choose. And if I could get everyone except the Institute to survive, that would be a good second choice. But I don't play like that. So I made the decisions I thought were best at the time. And in the end, I stand by those choices. People say, would you do anything differently? Yes, I would definitely do some things differently, but I probably would have still gone in there with the railroad and used them to destroy the Institute and freed the slaves, sorry, the synths at the same time. And I'm sorry if that's not what you would have done, but that's what Frank did. And I have to say, realistically, it's what everyone should have expected based upon the way I've been playing him from the very, very start. So, there you go. If for some reason you've managed to make it this far, well done for listening to my ramble. I suppose I should probably have had a... well, I did do a too long didn't read version, didn't I? When I said, if you think I chose the synths over humanity, you are wrong. I did not. Because that is simply not true. I chose the people of the Commonwealth. All of the people. Regardless of the colour of the skin or whether or not they have skin at all. If they are capable of saying, please don't kill me, and they are no threat to me or any other innocent, as far as I'm concerned, they deserve to live. And yes, synths are a threat. Ghouls are a threat. And super mutants are a threat. But so are other humans. And unless you want to kill every single solitary thing you meet, you are going to have to take some risks. You are going to have to form some alliances. And yes, sometimes those alliances are going to be with people who are a little different to you. And maybe that's a little scary. Maybe that's the way we've evolved, to fear the other. But we've also evolved brains. We've evolved the ability to think beyond our fears, take some chances, and indeed reach for the skies. And in this case, that is what I did. So, I hope I have laid that issue to rest, and I will get no more comments along the lines of, oh my god, you chose a household appliance. Although I suspect I'm probably being a little too hopeful, aren't I?